Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend. So there's this obvious kind of two realms, right? There's a sport dog realm, there's the pet dog realm. And as you were mentioning, there's a lot of learning curve, doesn't matter what techniques we're using. When it comes to the pet dog world, as you mentioned, kind of like the R plus is still kind of new and they're still trying to figure it out. I guess one of the arguments that always happens is one takes longer and one is more efficient, right? And so when dealing with, basic obedience, let's say I have a puppy, like me personally, I normally start, if I have a puppy under 6 months of age, like probably at the most, he has a slip lead on him, right? At the most, but a lot of it is going to be food work and condition reinforcers and teaching the dog to play, teaching the dog to engage, teaching to do a lot of all that cool stuff. And then when the dog gets older and start bigger, then we start introducing this concept of correction when the dog starts acting more impulsively or, reactive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Towards socially outside.
Mm-hmm.
And so there tends to be kind of, if you're able to do things stage by stage by stage, in my opinion, you're able to keep things pretty positive, right? If you go by stage, how does it affect in the R plus world when dealing with pet dogs who are already have behavioral issues? Right.
So,
who are older or with behavior.
Right. So I can't give a whole lot of input on that just because I don't do behavior work anymore. But again, it's all about making sure that we're setting that dog up for success the best way we absolutely can. So knowing the dog's thresholds, knowing the reinforcers for that dog, training the foundation before we put that dog in front of the triggers or whatever it might be. And specifically talking about reactive dogs, because that's like the most common thing.
Yeah.
And making sure that we have the mechanics of how do I get my dog out of the situation, and the handler has the skills to pay attention to those things before we start putting our dogs in that situation. I will say that if done right, you shouldn't know that dog is reactive by seeing them out on the street. I remember I'm looking at a painting of my Great Dane here. He was human aggressive. So he wasn't just reactive, he was human aggressive. And I had taken him on a group walk because we got to the point where he could be out in public fine, just as long as nobody like stared at him or tried to interact with him. And I was a really good bodyguard for him. And somebody had told my friend that they thought I was lying, that the dog wasn't reactive or wasn't aggressive. He was totally a normal dog. And she's like, well, that's because she's handling him correctly.
Right.
And because we were doing all that work, even though they didn't realize that every time I was rewarding him, it was because he had glanced at somebody and he chose to look back at me versus
right to let them go and focus back in on you.
To load on.
Exactly.
Yep.
One of my favorite resources for that's R plus is Control Unleashed by Leslie McDivitt. And it was one of the big reasons why I went R plus, because it talked about how to deal with reactivity and control and impulse control and all that stuff in an R plus way. And it's a huge resource. And she's got a few books out there now.
Can you say it one more time? Control Unleashed by who?
Control Unleashed by Leslie McDivitt, McDevitt.
McDivitt. How do you spell that again? McDivitt.
We'll be sure to put that in the description of the podcast for anybody listening right now, so you guys can find this book. Okay. So when you're controlling a dog in an R plus way that's leash reactive, are you using like a martingale collar, regular like collar?
I tend to use head halters. And so again, I'll reference back to this Great Dane. So he was my crossover dog. So when I got him, he was reacting to people 6 months old and younger. It was not a good situation. And so the Great Dane community told me to give him a come to Jesus moment. I tried. He got bigger and bigger and bigger. He outweighed me. And then suddenly that just was not an option. He was on a pinch collar. It wasn't an option. So that's when I started researching more, and I got the Control Unleashed book, and I started applying those methods. And it was a giant breakthrough. But obviously controlling that size dog, I'm not a big person. He outweighed me. The head halter made a huge difference. And so I know there's a bit of a stigma behind them. And if used incorrectly, they can cause injury. Absolutely. Same with every other tool.
That's true of anything. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm very careful about, how much leash my dog has and, that sort of thing. But yeah, so that's just to maintain control. Otherwise, he would
just get overpowered. Yeah.
Yeah. He's huge. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
I need to show you this.
That's what I tend to even use for my dogs now when we go out in public. Though, I have overly social dogs that want to say hi to everybody. that head halter will help with them as well while we're working through that for sure.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. You said you have 13 dogs?
I have 12 right now.
12 dogs.
Oh
okay.
my gosh.
It's too many.
And these are
13 is just too many.
And they're all personal dogs. These aren't dogs that you're.
No, they're personal,
wow.
lovely dogs.
Can you go through the breed range for me?
Yeah. I used to have a bigger range, but it's kind of narrowed down a little bit.
It's like Malinois. There's a
No,
crow
just two
too.
Malinois. I won't
got to
ever
tell
have more
people
than
about
two.
the crow also. We'll talk.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have 2 Malinois. That's famous in creature. I have, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 6 coolies now. Australian coolies. It's the breed I breed. I just have a litter. Yeah. So I've got 6 of those, I believe. Border Collie mix Zuma, who is the namesake for ZOOMDOG training. She was a rescue. A Border Staffy, so Border Collie Staffordshire Bull Terrier mix named Taboo. A Kickstart, a Border Collie. And then I have a Boston Terrier Shih Tzu mix named Edgar.
Kickstart.
I love that.
You got sweet old names. Like I thought my dog's name was cool. My Doberman's name is Black Dynamite.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's named after this character that I saw on a movie.
Yeah, Michael J. White. Yeah,
Michael J. White. Shout out to Michael J. White. But yeah, it's I love good dog names.
Allow me to shift gears for a second. So I want to talk a bit more about now this other sort of shift that you had and what sort of insights that gave you in your career. So does it feel different working with dogs in the capacity of seminars and things like that versus back in the day when you were working directly with clients? What have you learned? What's different about it?
What I like about seminars, and this is a very, very seminar inside or seminar presenter inside knowledge, is that when you're a seminar presenter, you are basked in this light, this novel light, where suddenly everything you say is magical. And you can say the same thing that their local trainer has told them 10 times, but because I said it, because I'm a seminar presenter, it's suddenly going to click in a different way for that handler. And so I love that because all of my local people that I work with, or the classes I used to teach, or this online students, like I feel that I say the same things over and over and over again. And then a presenter comes in and suddenly they're like, oh, did you know about this? I'm like, yeah, I told you about that like 6 months ago. So that's the big difference between that is as a presenter, that comes in, even the places I teach at, twice a year, I come in and everything I say has a different weight to it versus that client that I'm working with all of the time, it just doesn't have the same weight. And so it's a little bit different that way. What I don't like about being a presenter is I'm only seeing that dog and that handler for a day. If they're having an off day, I'm going to end up giving them the wrong advice. And because I'm a presenter, they're not going to speak up about that. And that's so challenging for me because I would rather have them say, this isn't how my dog normally is. And for me to give them advice that's actually going to be applicable versus me taking what I'm seeing in that moment.
Do you ever follow up with these people?
I do teach in the same places quite a bit. And then they always have my email address and my Facebook information to be able to contact me after the fact for sure.
Very cool.
Continue, and a lot of them are like my online students already anyway. And so it's just a chance for me to connect with them in that moment.
Got it.
But yeah, like it just having them, only seeing them for that split second time, it's a little bit challenging coming up with a good training plan versus the students I work with on a regular basis. I know that dog, I know that handler, I know what's going to work for them and what's not going to work for them. And we can just go about our training plan very efficiently that way.
What was that shift? What was that moment that you decided to move into seminars?
It was availability. So I had always taught like private lessons and group classes. And then when I moved down to work for Purina, I didn't have the time availability to do that anymore because I was working for Purina full time. And so I love teaching. It's what I've always wanted to do. And so I started teaching on the weekends that I could get away and started traveling that way. And so then pretty soon the seminar request demanded the availability I had at Purina, which is what prompted the move.
Got it.
Working at Purina. So that was the shift. I was kind of forced into it.
And they were okay with that? Purina was okay with you doing stuff on the...
Oh yeah, they're fantastic. It's a great company to work for. Oh my God,
Very
they're
cool.
amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever find that you miss certain elements in working with pet dog stuff?
Yeah, I do. Every now and then I get a crazy inkling to do like a basic obedience class or a puppy kindergarten.
Nice.
And I love how excited they are when things work. Oh my goodness.
Yes. Yes.
The easiest thing, go to a mat is my favorite thing to teach them, because I teach it fully shaped in my classes. Even pet dog, like that's their introduction to shaping is go to a mat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, when it works and they like that first time the dog chooses to go back to that mat and all their minds are blown. It's like my favorite.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
It's the
You're
best.
just like,
It's the best.
Exactly. But yes, I miss that. Now the sport dog world is getting so advanced, and my students are getting like, the groups I work with are so knowledgeable and such capable handlers that now I'm like having to up my game constantly just to make sure I'm giving them valuable information and stuff that they don't already know.
right. And that's a very good thing, right? That's
Yes,
a very,
it's
very
great.
good thing. We really want to make sure, and same thing here. And you know, after this, we kind of wanted to touch on what we were talking about just before we started rolling, you know, the whole thing about like, how do we kind of foster more just interaction and intermingling, not only between like our plus two balanced trainers, but even within, you know, and the people that don't necessarily agree with each other, even if they're like 99% of the way there.
Right.
And the way that I wanted to bring that up was when you, with your online stuff, like number one, you know, we found it interesting when we were talking to Tyler, who was a balanced trainer, and he was like, "Oh man, you have to reach out to Sara Brueske, you know, is our plus trainer." And it's not, and we were like, "Oh, see, like, you know, why are more people not just extending that olive branch and just talking it out? Like, what's the big deal?" Because ultimately, if we continue to progress dog training, regardless of what the methodology, everybody wins and every dog wins. And just like you can get more effective, run seminars. And that means you can, I'm sure, even though, you know, you miss people and working directly with them from time to time, I have no doubt that part of your decision was like, clearly you can affect more dogs by running seminars. Right. And so how do we get more people into that role?
Yeah. How do we cross-pollinate info, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So first off, I just want to re-say that we're all on the same spectrum. So we're all here for a reason, and we're all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep. We're on the same spectrum, whether we're, you know, balanced or not. And so I think part of it is the stigma. I think social media is not doing a big justice for us. And while it is a giant, great tool, there's just so much debate and so much anger and so much shame that's put on it that it's challenging. But at the same time, it does let us connect to different people. So like Tyler, I think he found me on Facebook originally, and that's how I connected with him. And so it is a fantastic tool if used correctly. The other thing is online training is a huge, huge benefit, because people that wouldn't have originally reached out because they didn't want to be the person to go to that seminar, or they didn't want to be the person to initiate that interaction with that type of trainer, they're able to take online classes and not tell anybody.
Yeah, that's a good
And so they can sign up as an auditor on an online class, learn the things, apply it, and start doing it in person, which is going to spread that method to more people and more people and more people.
Right.
And so I think that's a huge help. The other thing is like just getting these podcasts going and having different guests with different ideas on is a huge benefit as well. And like I had mentioned before we had started, you know, it's not just the balance trainer side. It's not just their responsibility to be reaching across that gap to help bridge this, because there's a huge benefit for us sharing knowledge. And so in my training group, I was just telling you guys, I'm going to have Pat Stewart on as a guest trainer.
That's awesome.
And start prompting hopefully more R plus trainers to start reaching across that gap as well. And it was a huge thing for me to learn, because when I started doing Madia Ring, like I have to work with balance trainers. That's 99% of the trainers out there. And while I do have connections to some really great R plus trainers like Chad Byerly in Ohio, he's just one guy with only one set of ideas. And in order to expand my knowledge, I have to work with more and more and more. And so my decoy, he's a balanced trainer and he's fantastic. And I ask him for ideas. He asks me for ideas. And it doesn't mean we have to take the ideas, but we train differently. And yet we still work really, really well together. And I'm a better trainer because I train with those people.
So how does that work? So like if he would just give you insight into an approach, and then you'd see, how can I replicate that in my style, or how can I parallel that?
I'm very set in my, like, this is going to work. We're going to make this work.
Yeah.
So,
but you got to be determined. As a dog trainer, there's determination.
But it's also the part that I enjoy, is coming up with training plans and problem solving in unique ways. Like that's what I'm known for. And so like my approach to my object guard is weird. It's different. My approach to, you know, my escort is weird and different. And so my defensive handler is weird and different. And everything's weird and different. So poor Joey, I'll show up and be like, okay, so that problem we're having, we're going to fix it this way. And he'll look at me And I'll be like, do you see a problem with that? And he goes, yeah, I do. And he'll tell me where the problem probably will arise. And then we'll talk about it. And I'll say, okay, if that happens, then we're going to approach it this way. So it's an open conversation.
Got it.
But that being said, like I have Kevin Bain out for another seminar coming up in March, and he's a balance trainer, but he has a different way to teach the object guard that I'm definitely taking some ideas from, and the escort, and definitely taking some ideas from that, and the defensive handler for sure. And so it's just one giant like melting pot of ideas at this point. And like that's any good trainer, regardless of your methodologies, is that you're learning from other people and you're applying little bits and pieces from the way they do things and adapting it for how it's going to work in your system.